Life of an ancient Egyptian royal, the reality behind the gold. When most people imagine an ancient Egyptian royal, they picture someone reclining on cushions, sipping wine, shaded from the blazing sun while servants fan them with giant palm leaves. And yes, luxury was definitely part of the deal. But that glamorous image only shows a tiny slice of the truth. In reality, being a royal in ancient Egypt, especially a pharaoh, meant living an intensely structured and demanding life. From around 3150 BC until 30 BC, Egypt was ruled by kings and queens known as pharaohs. These rulers weren't just political leaders, they were considered divine figures, living gods on earth. That meant their responsibilities stretched far beyond simply sitting on a throne. Always surrounded, never alone. If you were an introvert, royal life would have been exhausting. Pharaohs were rarely alone. From sunrise to sunset, they were surrounded by officials, priests, advisors, guards, family members, and trusted nobles. Their inner circle formed a constant entourage. Loyalty was rewarded generously, friends and relatives were often granted important court positions. Favoritism and family connections weren't modern inventions, they were very much alive thousands of years ago. Privacy? Almost non-existent. The royal morning routine. A pharaoh's day began early, and not by their own effort. Servants would wake the ruler and assist with every part of getting ready. Bathing was not a casual splash of water. It was a ritual. Cleanliness symbolized purity, and purity was essential for someone considered divine. Perfumed oils were commonly used, especially by rulers who wanted to emphasize their status. Fragrance wasn't just about smelling pleasant, it was a symbol of wealth and refinement. Keep in mind, this was long before deodorant or modern hygiene products. After bathing came grooming. Specialized attendants handled everything from sandals to elaborate clothing. Styling teams arranged jewelry, applied cosmetics, and positioned wigs perfectly. Yes, wigs. The power of the wig. In ancient Egypt, wigs were more than fashion statements. They were powerful symbols of rank and authority. The higher your status, the more elaborate your wig. Royal wigs could be incredibly detailed and sometimes decorated with gold or silver threads. There were even regulations about who was allowed to wear them. Enslaved people were not permitted to wear wigs at all. Pharaohs also wore ceremonial false beards during important events. These weren't for style alone, they symbolized divine authority and connection to the gods. Wearing a beard wig reinforced the message: this ruler was not just human, but chosen by the divine. Of course, under the hot Egyptian sun, those heavy wigs must have been uncomfortable. But appearance and symbolism mattered more than comfort. A schedule packed with power. The phrase "with great power comes great responsibility" would have perfectly applied to an Egyptian pharaoh. Historical accounts suggest that rulers followed highly organized daily schedules. While some historians debate how rigid those schedules truly were, there's no doubt their days were filled with official duties. Mornings typically involved administrative briefings. The pharaoh would receive reports about agriculture, taxation, trade, military matters, and construction projects. Egypt was a complex civilization, and keeping it stable required constant attention. They also held audiences, meeting officials, foreign envoys, and citizens seeking justice. Pharaohs acted as the highest legal authority in the land. Decisions made in those meetings could impact thousands of lives. And remember, no coffee. Religion was central. Religion wasn't separate from politics in ancient Egypt. It was deeply intertwined. Pharaohs were believed to maintain balance in the universe, a concept known as ma'at, representing order, harmony, and truth. Participating in religious ceremonies wasn't optional. It was essential. They performed rituals, made offerings to the gods, and oversaw temple activities. If disasters struck, famine, flooding issues, disease, people believed the gods were displeased. That responsibility ultimately fell on the pharaoh. The crown wasn't just a symbol of power. It was a spiritual burden. Traveling like a king. While modern luxury cars didn't exist, Egyptian royalty still traveled in style. When leaving the palace, pharaohs were often carried in sedan chairs, ornate seats mounted on long poles, lifted by servants. This elevated position not only provided comfort but also displayed status publicly. Royal attendants known as fan-bearers provided airflow while walking beside or behind the ruler. Their role often indicated closeness to the pharaoh and sometimes even carried protective duties. It may not have been a sports car, but it certainly made a statement. Luxury with limits. Yes, Egyptian royals enjoyed fine food, beautiful clothing, golden jewelry, and elaborate palaces. But their lives were not endless vacations. They were political leaders, religious icons, military decision-makers, and symbols of national unity, all at once. Every action carried meaning. Every appearance reinforced authority. Their days were carefully managed because the stability of an entire civilization rested on their shoulders. So next time you imagine ancient Egyptian royalty lounging effortlessly in the shade, remember this. Behind the gold crowns and decorated wigs was a ruler managing one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world, balancing luxury with immense responsibility. Being a pharaoh wasn't just about living like a god. It was about carrying the weight of one divine authority, more than just a crown. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs did not simply rule the land, they claimed to rule by divine right. They were believed to be sacred figures, chosen by the gods and serving as a living bridge between the human world and the divine realm. This spiritual status was not symbolic fluff. It shaped their entire daily existence. Because they were considered intermediaries between mortals and the gods, their schedules were filled with religious responsibilities. They appointed high priests, authorized temple construction, supervised rituals, and took part in sacred ceremonies meant to preserve balance in the universe. Some ancient accounts, including those written by Greek historian Diodorus, describe pharaohs visiting temples daily. There, they would undergo ritual purification, be ceremonially anointed, and present offerings to the gods. These offerings were often symbolic, designed to maintain Ma'at, the sacred principle of cosmic order, harmony, and stability. Even when a pharaoh could not physically attend a ceremony, statues placed inside temples ensured that their divine presence was still represented. In a way, it was the ancient world's version of sending a stand-in to a meeting, except that stand-in was carved in stone and believed to hold spiritual power. Royal privilege, the luxury of the elite. Life at the top came with serious advantages. While ordinary Egyptians survived mainly on bread, beer, vegetables, and fish, royalty enjoyed far more extravagant meals. Royal banquets featured roasted goose, beef, exotic fruits like dates and figs, honeyed desserts, and fine wine, a drink that was rare and expensive for most of the population. Wine, in particular, was considered a luxury item. It symbolized refinement and wealth, and it flowed generously in the royal court. Feasts were not just about eating, they reinforced status and power. Abundance proved authority. Marriage, power, and the royal household. Most Egyptians practiced monogamy. Pharaohs did not. Male rulers were permitted, and often expected, to have multiple wives. Among them was the great royal wife, the chief queen who held the highest rank. Alongside her were secondary wives, concubines, and members of the royal harem. Harems were not merely romantic arrangements. They were political tools. Marriages often strengthened alliances with powerful families or foreign kingdoms. The size of a king's household reflected his wealth and influence. However, life within the harem was complex and competitive. Favor shifted. Power dynamics changed. And history shows that royal households could become dangerous places. With many wives came many children. Some pharaohs fathered astonishing numbers of offspring. Ramses II, for example, is believed to have had over 100 children. Royal children were usually raised in a designated section of the palace and educated by tutors, nurses, and scholars. While they lived in luxury, they were also groomed for political roles, especially sons who might inherit the throne. Monumental construction, building immortality. Pharaohs were not only rulers, they were ambitious builders. They decided where temples would rise, which monuments would be constructed, and how their legacy would be carved into stone. Construction projects were political statements as much as architectural achievements. Few rulers embraced this more than Ramses II. His massive temples and statues were not modest works of devotion, they were bold declarations of dominance. Monumental architecture projected strength, stability, and divine favor. In ancient Egypt, stone was propaganda. The royal hunt, sport and symbolism. Hunting was a privilege reserved primarily for royalty. While pharaohs had no need to hunt for survival, their kitchens were well supplied, royal hunts served symbolic purposes. Lions, bulls, and other powerful animals represented chaos and danger. When a king defeated such creatures, it symbolized his control over disorder. Sometimes, animals were even captured in advance to ensure the king's success. Skill was less important than spectacle. Scenes of hunting were frequently depicted in tombs and carvings. Tutankhamun's burial artifacts, for example, show him returning triumphantly from an ostrich hunt. These images were carefully crafted messages. The king was strong, capable, and in command of nature itself. Beneath the gold, royal health struggles. Despite their divine image, pharaohs were human, and often unhealthy. Royal families frequently married within their own bloodlines to preserve pure lineage. This practice reduced genetic diversity and likely contributed to inherited disorders. Tutankhamun, for instance, is believed to have suffered from physical impairments, possibly including a limp. Other rulers appear to have struggled with obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, conditions linked to their rich diets. Ironically, ancient writers described royal diets as carefully regulated for health. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that indulgence often outweighed discipline. Divine status did not grant immunity from biology. Palace intrigue, when family becomes the enemy. Royal life was not only luxurious, it was dangerous. Power struggles within the palace were common. In 1155 BC, Ramses III became the victim of what historians call the harem conspiracy. One of his wives allegedly plotted his assassination in hopes of placing her own son on the throne. Hatshepsut faced resistance during her reign, particularly because she was a female ruler in a traditionally male role. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, engaged in a civil conflict with her brother, who was also her co-ruler and husband, to secure her authority. In ancient Egypt, family disputes could reshape history. A life larger than legend. The lives of ancient Egyptian royals were dramatic, intense, and rarely peaceful. Their days were filled with religious ritual, political decisions, public appearances, and strategic alliances. Their nights might involve banquets, celebrations, or tense palace negotiations. They lived surrounded by luxury, gold jewelry, perfumed oils, elaborate wigs, and grand architecture, yet carried immense responsibility and constant pressure. To rule Egypt was to embody both god and governor. Behind every ornate crown stood a human being navigating power, faith, ambition, rivalry, and mortality. Ancient Egyptian royalty did not merely live extravagantly. They lived under the weight of eternity.